Welcome to ShiftWatch. I'm your host, Starbuck. In this episode, what my guides have revealed to me about the direction humanity is heading will require some fundamental new perspectives, not the least of which is sacred geometry and the flower of life. I found a wonderful resource at Spirit Science to get you where you need to be. Once you have an understanding of this truth, what I'm about to share about humanity should floor you. Next, biggest earthquakes are triggered by the sun. And here's some well-researched content by Ben Davidson at Space Weather News, proving the correlation between the sun's activities and Earth's growing seismic events. Then our friend Scanner Guy 1968 shared some active footage. This time he explained the equipment and the settings he used, as well as where in the sky he was pointing his camera. Rarely do we know where in the sky phenomenon is being viewed, but today it was focusing on the Big Dipper. Admittedly, not all of these are UFOs or UAPs, but not all of them are satellites either. And finally, Dolores Cannon's views she shared through the convoluted universe should be even more resonant now. Listen to her explanations of the human vibration and frequency requirements for entering New Earth. If you've been feeling these energies, you know that Earth's rise to her next level is right around the corner.
Everything in the universe is geometric, whether it's people, trees, cats, planets, solar systems, stars, you name it. Anything in the universe can be measured on a geometric scale. Having said that, it's important to note that creation is also geometric. What we're going to be looking at today is the pattern of creation. Essentially what this means is that everything in the universe comes out of this single pattern. I'm not making this up. This single image will change everything. When I mentioned in Lesson 5 that the ancient Egyptians and even more ancient civilizations knew about a deeper, basic understanding of the universe, this is the flower of life, and it is also the creation pattern of everything in existence. Even non-tangible things, emotions, thoughts, music in its entire spectrum, everything comes from this image. Okay, so there are 13 information systems that comes out of the flower of life. Today, I'm going to show you how physical reality can manifest itself, which is just one of the 13 systems. In future lessons, we will look at more. It's also important to note that at first it may not make sense. I ask that you do not choose immediately to shut this out, and just watch with an open mind, and try and see this in a new way. Also, I want to tell you that by learning about sacred geometry simply by observing, you are absorbing only a very minuscule amount of information. If you really want to learn more, you must begin to draw it yourself. I kid you not, when you do this, you begin to see things in a new way. You begin to understand why things are done in the way that they are done. Promise. The flower of life was known around the world in ancient times. It was found in Ireland, Turkey, Israel, Egypt, China, Greece, Germany, India, and Iceland. It's also been recorded to have been found in England, Tibet, Japan, Sweden, Lapland, the Yucatan, and I think 14 other places. This thing is everywhere. Not only that, but everywhere around the world it has the same name, the flower of life. Now, to understand the flower of life, first we have to talk about how it's formed. This could get incredibly complex, so I'll try and keep it simple. Imagine consciousness, or spirit, floating in a void, which means it's nothingness, and then spirit. No physical body or mind, just spirit, and that's it. Then blackness, essentially nothing, all around the spirit, for infinite. Spirit decides to do something, so it expands its consciousness all around itself as far as it can go without moving. It creates a sphere around itself. This is the first circle in the flower of life. Then, spirit has an awareness of what's around itself in 360 degrees. It moves to the very edge of the sphere anywhere and repeats what it did the first time. It creates this image, which also creates the Vesica Pisces. Within the Vesica Pisces is a vast and incredible amount of knowledge about width, proportion, depth. Also comes the square roots of 2, 3, and 5, which are all numbers that go on forever. But even more interestingly, comes geometric information about light. We'll talk about that in a moment. Now, spirit has no choice but to do it again. Spirit is flawless, and therefore it will move flawlessly, creating the next circle either here or here, exactly one radius away from the other circle next to it. Every time spirit moves another sphere, more and more knowledge comes out of the image that is created. The first complete image to be formed is this. It has two names, the seed of life, or the Genesis pattern, and for good reason. Now, let's look at the book of Genesis for a second. Each of these movements, or creations of circles, can be seen as another day. On the first movement, the second sphere, it created knowledge about not only mathematical proportions, but light. The first sentence of Genesis says, "The earth was without form and void, and that the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters." In the very next sentence, God says, let there be light. The key here is in the order. The movement happened first, then light happened immediately after. Well, but what about the waters? Well, you have to remember, the Bible has been changed over time a lot. The ancient Egyptians would say that the way our modern Bibles begin creation is impossible, especially if you think about it from a physics point of view. Imagine a dark, infinite space that goes on forever and ever in all directions. You're just floating there with nothing. You can't really fall, but where would you fall to? From a purely physics or mathematical point of view, motion itself, or kinetic energy, is absolutely impossible in a void. You can't even rotate, because motion cannot become real unless there is one other object in the space around you. So the ancient Egyptians would say that before God moved upon the face of the waters, it would first have to create something to move relative to. So, Genesis pattern, after 3 spheres, you get the Holy Trinity. Another interesting one, it says in many Bibles of the world, not just the Christian Bible, that on the 4th day of Genesis, exactly 1/2 of creation was completed. Starting from the first motion, exactly 1/2 of the circles were formed on the 4th day. 5th day of Genesis, 6th circle, more information, and then on the 6th day, a geometric miracle takes place. The last circle forms a complete 6-petaled flower. This is what many earlier Bibles meant when they said, in the beginning there were 6. Our Bible even said creation was formed in 6 days, and this fits exactly. This is the pattern of Genesis, and so it's called the Genesis pattern. It's also the beginning of the creation of the universe that we live in. These original movements of spirit are really important, but now let's look at something even cooler. Another image that comes out of this pattern is this. It's called the Tree of Life. Many may recognize this as the Jewish or Hebrew Kabbalah, but the Kabbalah did not originate this image, and there is proof. The Tree of Life does not belong to any culture, not even the Egyptians, who carved the Tree of Life on 2 sets of 3 pillars at Karnak Temple, Luxor, over 5,000 years ago. It's outside any race or religion, as with all of these images. They are patterns that are intimately connected with nature. You'll also notice that every circle on the Tree of Life is either the length or width of the Vesica Pisces. The second image beyond Genesis in the Flower of Life is the Egg of Life. This is formed during the second vortex motion. Upon its completion, it creates an image like this, a 3-dimensional shape that you can hold in your hand. If you were to connect their centers, you would see a cube. So what? Who cares? Well, the ancient Egyptians did, because they were concerned with creation, life, and death. They called this cluster of spheres the Egg of Life. You probably won't believe me just yet, but this shape is the morphogenic structure that created your body. Your entire physical existence is dependent on the Egg of Life structure, and everything about you was created from that form. Everything from your eye color to how long your fingers are. This is a whole lesson on its own, so let's move on for now. All around the world, the Flower of Life was always made the exact same way. See, this pattern can clearly go on forever. However, they always stopped after 19 circles. Why? Well, because they didn't want you to see what I'm about to show you. Back then, this image and knowledge was so sacred that they couldn't allow it to become common knowledge. It was appropriate at that time. However, now we either use the information or fall further into darkness. In biology, all cells have a zona pellucida around the edge. These circles around the Flower of Life are the zona pellucida of the Flower of Life. You must remove these, then complete the spheres that were cut off by the zona pellucida. With one more step, you will have the secret. Finish the drawing, add the final missing circles, giving you this. This image is the fruit of life. This pattern of 13 circles is one of the holiest, most sacred forms in existence. It's called the fruit because it is the result, the fruit, from which the fabric of the details of the reality were created. Remember when we talked about male and female energy, lesson 4? As you can see, this image is female. It has no straight lines. However, when you combine male lines with these female circles, something amazing happens. What you do is draw a straight line from the very center of every single circle to every other circle in this image. When you do this, you get an image which is known throughout the universe, everywhere, as Metatron's cube. It is one of the most important informational systems in the universe, one of the basic creation patterns in existence. So what is Metatron's cube? Well, anyone who has studied sacred geometry, or even regular geometry for that matter, knows that there are 5 unique shapes in the universe, and that they are crucial to understanding both regular and sacred geometry. They are called the Platonic solids. A Platonic solid has certain characteristics by definition. First of all of its faces are the same size. For example, a cube, the most well-known Platonic solid, has a square on every face, so all of its faces are the same size. Secondly, the edges of the Platonic solids are all the same length. All edges of the cube are the same length. Third, it only has one size of interior angles between the faces. In the case of the cube, this angle is 90 degrees. And fourth, when put inside of a sphere, all of the points will touch the edge of the sphere perfectly. With that definition, there are only 4 shapes besides the cube that fit that description. So what are they? Well, we have the dodecahedron, the tetrahedron, the octahedron, the isosahedron, and the hexahedron. All of these shapes are found within Metatron's cube. This knowledge is also where original alchemy came from. The ancient alchemists and great souls like Pythagoras, father of Greece, considered each shape to have an elemental aspect to them. The tetrahedron was considered fire, the cube was earth, the octahedron was air, the isosahedron was water, and the dodecahedron was ether. Ether, also known as prana, and tachyon energy are all the same thing. They extend anywhere and are accessible at any point in space, time, and dimension. This is the great secret of zero-point technology. The sphere is voidness. These 6 elements are the building blocks of the universe, and they create the qualities of the universe. To summarize, this is the first informational system that comes out of the fruit of life through Metatron's cube. Alright, I'm gonna wrap up with something I think you'll enjoy. Do you believe in aliens? Even after lesson 5, I realize many of you might be skeptical. Would you believe me if I flat out told you that aliens have been coming to Earth and helping us for a very long time now? No? How about now? This is the flower of life in a crop circle. Remember, the flower of life is not only tied to everything in the universe, but consciousness, spirit, as well. Here's another one, and another one. Here's the Vesica Pisces in a crop circle. See, by creating these crop circles, aliens have been actually affecting and helping the consciousness of the planet. Do not fear aliens. They're here to help.
The data has officially confirmed that the magnitude 8.8 earthquake that struck Kamchatka at the end of July was indeed a perfect match for the solar polar field's megaquake triggering model. The 6th largest earthquake on record, struck during the negative flux peak of the solar polar fields. Now, to understand what that means, we're going to do our homework right here. It's long, I know, but it's the foundational and most reliable measure preceding megaquakes. I will come back after this little bit of homework for a quick roundup.
In the years of watching Billy run our electricity and plasma lab, 2 things have become abundantly clear. Oscillatory patterns are ubiquitous when you're dealing with electromagnetism, and there are 2 different kinds of important electromagnetic events: peak magnetism and polarity reversal. In many ways, the difference between -1 and +1 is as great as the difference between 1 and 1,000. It's where the force changes direction. So I suppose it should not have been surprising when we saw a pattern connecting peaks in magnetism and polarity reversals among the grand solar polar fields with the largest earthquakes on the planet. Nor should it be surprising now that it has been confirmed by third parties and further observations. This video summarizes 5 years of observations and research. Thus far, the data suggests there is a relationship between the sun's magnetic fields and the largest earthquakes. Let's go back to New Year's Day, 2014, when this all started. We have multiple videos showing that the biggest earthquakes since a number of solar anomalies in 2007 and 2008 have all been correlated with coronal hole activity, and we are not the only ones showing it. This is way old news. But if we're going to use coronal holes, solar wind power, blocking fields above, well then we should look here as well. Let me overlay those last 10 8 magnitude earthquakes or bigger, and if you use the Stanford site I showed you yesterday, you'll see how darn incredible this is. After looking through the entire data set back into the 1970s, we had to get the professionals involved. Living in Columbus, Ohio at that time, I went to the Ohio State University Statistics Department, where the professors and select grad students ran a statistical consulting service. A few months later, they had mathematically shown that pattern to be true, and we collaborated to publish a paper. Dr. Kongpa Yen contributed to the paper, and Dr. Holloman represented the Ohio State group. Here's the scoop. Due to Earth's orbit tilting slightly versus the solar equator, we're closer to one pole 6 months out of the year, and then the other. We see that up top, and it presents as a peak in solar polar field strength every 6 months opposite the other. Approximately every 11 years, these fields reverse as the sun goes into sunspot maximum, and the process takes place with 6-month alternation of polar field strength, but with the opposite polarity at each pole. The first paper looked at data from 1976, the start of operation of the Wilcox Solar Observatory data, and continued through the end of 2013. Blue curve is the northern fields, red is the south, and you can see both the alternating strength each cycle and the 11-year cycle of reversing polarity. The yellow line is the average of the two, and this is important because our latest study tweaked that a bit. We were also able to separate the polar field cycle into segments: polar minimum, polar recovery, and polar maximum. Polar minimum may be considered polar reversal as well, since that is what's causing the minimum strength of the fields. It appears the nice sine wave pattern usually doesn't return through polar minimum and polar recovery till 18 months thereafter, and we're in polar maximum, which of course is sunspot minimum. The paper demonstrated statistically that the peaks in magnetism and reversals of magnetism of the individual polar fields and the reversals of the average solar polar fields of the Sun were closely tied to the largest earthquakes on the planet. When we started, the goal was to try to use the polar fields to eliminate half the days as not being tied to those significant polar field events to see if we could get far more than 50% of the largest earthquakes in that window. We ended up excluding nearly 60%, meaning that if there was no correlation between the solar polar fields and the largest earthquakes, we'd expect to see about 41% of those largest earthquakes in the time period. But instead, just under 80% of the largest earthquakes appear to occur close enough to significant solar polar field events to drive a very high confidence, in excess of 99.99%, that this pattern is not random.
This thing picks up everything. Any little object, ever so faint in the night sky, in video mode, it picks it up. What I'm going to be concentrating on is right there is the Big Dipper. And it seems like objects have been lighting up around it quite a bit. So what we're going to do is run the video mode, speed footage up, and see what we can see.
But now some people, if they're not evolved enough, are going to be left with the old Earth. You cannot move to the new Earth until your frequency and vibration matches it. It's like everything, even when you go to the other side, your frequency and vibration has to match wherever you go. With the new Earth, our frequency and vibration is being changed so that we'll be able to match the other Earth. And it's differently in another dimension. I don't think there's time for me to explain dimensions, but I think you understand what they are. I've written a lot about the different dimensions that are around us all the time. But it is a new Earth that is being created to move into a new dimension. They said this has never happened before in the history of a planet, that an entire planet will move en masse to another dimension. I found other cases in the new book where civilizations have shifted into the new dimension. The Mayans were one, and the Anasazi out in New Mexico, I was just out there. Some of these races totally disappeared. Nobody knew where they went to. I've had regressions where people went to those times and were part of the ones that shifted. The whole civilization, like the Mayans, for instance, developed to the point to where they could do this. They raised their own frequency and vibration and decided to leave and go into the other dimension. They shifted en masse as a civilization. This is what the year 2012 has to do with the Mayan calendar, because they were advanced enough that when they could see the next big thing that was going to occur was when the entire Earth would make the shift into the new dimension. And they put the date 2012 on it. And they keep telling me this does not mean time will end at that time. They said this means it will be a culmination of what's going on. This all began about the year 2003. And our bodies and the planet, everything has been shifting and adapting, changing frequency ever since. So by 2012, it should be at the point to where we're ready to cross over, if you want to say. Now, the effects on our body, we're feeling it more and more. They said the human body cannot shift in frequency and vibration quickly. It would destroy the body. Has to be done gradually. This is why I said these new children coming in are already adapted. They know they're already here. It's the rest of us. We have to do it in stages. Your body and frequency and vibration will shift. Then it will level out. Then it will shift again, maybe several months. Well, we feel this in our body. And a lot of people are telling me they're going to the doctors. The doctors don't understand what's wrong with them. They put them on pills and things, but actually it's adjusting to the frequency vibration. Some of the main symptoms that they're telling me, high blood pressure, heart palpitations. They have a lot of problems with the heart. AFib, heart palpitations, and the blood pressure, depression, aches and pains throughout the body. The muscles are aches and pains in the joints. This is as the body is changing in the frequency and adjusting to it. And the entire body is being changed. They said the doctors are going from the old information that they've been taught. But the body is no longer that way. The cells in your body are constantly receiving new information. The DNA is being changed constantly. The doctors don't understand this. But this is what's causing these symptoms. You may go along for several months and not have any, and then it'll do it again. We're all becoming more and more sensitive to energy. You feel that. Because this is what's happening as we move. By the year 2012, it's supposed to be at the culmination when most of our bodies will be there. The ones who are not going, they cannot change their vibration and frequency fast enough. It can't be done that quickly. It has to be an ongoing, gradual process. Those will be left with the old Earth. They said they will stay with what they have created. So that's why we have to change, we have to move on if we're going to be separating and moving out of this. And that's what they told me. The main thing you have to tell people, they said they must get rid of karma if you want to go on to the new earth. And believe me, it's beautiful. The descriptions they've given, it is beyond belief. And they said you cross over and you don't look back because you don't want to see what's happening behind you. But another thing that's happening, I'll get back to that part, another thing that's happening to us, our diets are changing. Do you notice that? Your diets are changing. They said you must get away from heavy meats. The body to become lighter, you have to eat lighter foods to raise it. The heavy foods hold you down, especially the meats, the red meats hold you down. You want to raise the body, the vibration, have lighter foods. They said the best foods are live foods. Live foods, they mean fresh fruits and vegetables. Organic if you can get it. But the fresh fruits and vegetables are the best diet. Some chicken and fish, but they stay away from the beef and the pork, especially because of what's being done to it at this time. But those kind of meats will hold you to the earth. You're supposed to be lightening. And you'll get to where you won't want to eat much. But it's fresh fruits and vegetables. You get away from the sugars. They said water is beyond comprehension, the value of water. But they said eventually, as you notice, you're going to be going into all the liquid diets. You'll feel like that's what you want. So you'll notice the effects on your body. Your body's changing, your diets are changing if you're paying attention to this. Time is speeding up. Everything's going faster. We're becoming more and more sensitive to energies. There's a lot happening if you're aware of it and paying attention to it.